When we talk about emotional eating, we tend to use that one term, emotional eating, as an umbrella term for all kinds of emotional eating. And I want to break it down into 3 categories, because depending on which category of emotional eater you most identify with, it's a bit of an indication of what needs are trying to be met through using food. I also want to add at the beginning that I am not anti-emotional eating. I think most people eat emotionally some of the time. But I also understand that for some people, the emotional eating itself becomes a whole new problem on top of whatever problem the emotional eating is trying to help with. So I'm calling these 3 categories the 3 Ps, and it stands for pleasure, pain, and purity. Pleasure and pain probably sound quite self-evident. If your emotional eating is around pleasure, it's usually around you are trying to create a positive feeling rather than trying to get away from a painful or uncomfortable one. And we do this a lot in our culture. We have lots of foods and traditions around food that are associated with special occasions or holidays. Even having a birthday cake is an emotional eating experience that is usually about trying to create a positive feeling. But the way it might show up day to day is that it could be that you are using food as entertainment, or it could be that you feel like there is just not much pleasure in your life, so food becomes this one place where you get that sense of pleasure. And comfort eating is an interesting one, because sometimes we might want to just have something because it feels cozy and comforting. But if someone says to me they struggle with comfort eating, I usually get them to try on the word safety. Is it really about comfort, or is it about trying to feel safe and okay with food? Because if it's not really about comfort and it's about just trying to feel okay, that's probably going to be in the pain category. And the pain category of emotional eating is about eating to try to avoid painful emotions. And the softer end of this might look like a bit of self-soothing, or it could look like numbing and checking out, or it can even look like full-blown dissociation. And the purity piece is about using food to try to make you feel a certain way about yourself. So using food emotionally can sometimes be dieting or restricting or controlling food. It's like, if I feel in control, then I feel okay about myself. And the more intertwined your self-esteem is with how you eat, the more likely you are to have a problem with food. Because now food has so much emotional power to dictate how you feel about yourself. So again, the classic emotional eating often looks like, oh, I'm eating a load of quote unquote junk foods or processed foods to just make me feel good. But emotional eating could also be orthorexia, becoming obsessed with eating a certain quality or type of food in order for you to feel okay. You're doing it for this emotional payback of feeling okay. So if you identify mostly with the pleasure category, there could be a question around getting some more pleasure into your life. And I also want to distinguish between that kind of stable pleasure and the empty pleasure that feels like you're chasing something. You may know the kind, it's like you're eating and you're trying to get this feeling that you're not quite getting to. You don't arrive at satisfaction. Sometimes we might think it's the dopamine circuitry here. We're chasing that dopamine fix that never really satisfies, but we can feel compelled to keep chasing it. Whereas the more stable pleasures tend to be the little things. So they can sound a bit benign and not very exciting when we talk about them. Being able to be outside and appreciate nature. It's that seeing a sunset and feeling awe. It's also having satisfying relationships with people, being able to communicate your needs so that you feel like you're an equal partner in your relationships. But most people that I meet that have a distinct lack of pleasure in their lives is usually because they're living their lives for other people. That's generally what I see. That's not going to be everyone, but it's a common pattern. And just consider this, if you think you're someone who eats for pleasure, sometimes there can be that kind of pleasure chasing that we're compelled to chase it because if we weren't chasing pleasure, we would feel pretty terrible. So it feels like it's about obtaining pleasure, but really it's about because it's too painful to be still and not trying to change the pleasure, in which case you're more likely to be in the pain category. Is food really a source of joy, or does it feel like this compulsive chasing that you never quite reach? So if you think you're someone who eats to move away from painful emotions, the first thing I'd like you to ask yourself is, can you even identify what those emotions are? Because I would often be compelled to compulsively eat when I was just in this agitated state. I knew that there was something going on, but I couldn't really identify what I was feeling. It wasn't as straightforward as this classical oversimplified look of emotional eating as, oh, I feel sad, so I'm going to eat something so I don't feel sad. And I realized a couple of things about what was going on for me. And one is I was feeling several things at once. So I might be feeling depressed and low energy, but then I'm also feeling guilty about the fact that I don't have any energy. And I'm also feeling shame because I think I should be able to just pull myself together. And that's a pretty potent combination. So when you're identifying these feelings, the question then becomes, okay, are the emotions that I'm experiencing, that I'm trying to get away from, are they chronic, as in, are they just a hum that's there all the time in the background, or do they come and go? If they come and go, that's probably part of the human experience. It might be something about reducing intensity and how you are talking to yourself and judging yourself for your emotions. But if it's chronic and it's constant, there's some emotional resolution that is needed. I don't know if I could have recovered had I not done the work as such on my relationship with myself and self-acceptance. And that came from not a, oh, I'm good enough. It actually came from, oh, maybe there's part of me that's never going to feel good enough. Maybe I'm always going to feel like I'm never quite reaching my potential, and that's okay. I don't have to tell myself I'm doing my best. I can tell myself sometimes maybe I'm not doing my best, and that's okay. I think so many of us are in that trap where we feel like there is a better version of ourselves just around the corner that we're trying to get to. When I've fixed my food stuff, when I've done this, when I'm more like this, then I'll feel okay about myself. When I think there's something in embracing the flaws and the messiness of even having to be a human being on this planet. We're constantly fed these messages about who we're supposed to be, how we're supposed to be, what our routines and schedules are supposed to look like, what our bodies are supposed to look like. So when it comes to using food to deal with painful emotions, there's another piece around changing your relationship with the painful emotions. So one of mine that I couldn't bear, that I would binge on a lot, would be despair and hopelessness. I had deep, deep bouts of feeling despair and hopeless. So there's the feeling of despair and hopelessness, but there's also the story about it. And it's the story that's so frightening, because the story means that despair and hopelessness feels like it's just going to go on forever. There's no hope, nothing's going to change. So what's the point in even trying to look after myself? Never going to get better. And once that story took a hold, there was no way I wasn't going to eat on that. And now it looks a lot more like, not every time, because it can catch me out in life, I'm a human being, but I have seen how it's possible to experience despair and hopelessness and recognize it as an experience. I recognize I am experiencing hopelessness right now. This is what I'm experiencing. So it's the capacity to doubt the story around it. How do I know if nothing's going to change? How do I know what the future holds? Hopelessness and despair tells us we do, because it's using our emotional state right now to predict the future. So with emotional eating, I don't think it's about, oh, just figure out how to not eat when you feel these things. I really think it's about changing how we're experiencing our emotions. And that comes from our relationship with ourselves and noticing the stories that we are believing about our feelings and how we judge our feelings, judge ourselves for having certain feelings. You might think your feelings are too big. Maybe you've been called over-emotional or too sensitive. So now when you have big feelings, you just feel shame because you were shamed for them. And now you continue to shame yourself. Instead of, maybe I'm somebody who has some quite big feelings. Maybe I feel them intensely. We don't know how anyone else is experiencing their emotions. And if you're somebody who uses the way that you eat to try to feel okay about yourself, to try and keep shame at bay, I use this word purity because it's this idea of, if I am good enough, if my food is good enough, if my body is good enough, if all these things, these external things in the physical world are as they should be, then I can relax and then I'll feel okay. What if the version of you that you are today is absolutely fine? What if the version of you today is just enough? And there's something maybe quite human, maybe it's our ego, maybe it's our conditioning, I don't know, that's going to want to go, that's not enough. I can do better, I can be better. None of us live up to our potential, I believe. Because we're human beings and we get tired and we get fed up and we get rebellious and we feel hopeless sometimes, we feel anxious and we feel paralyzed. All of these experiences, when you are experiencing them, it can feel like you're the only person in the world feeling like this. And you're really not. As a therapist who sits with people in their emotions all the time, I can tell you, you are not alone, in feeling those things. And of course, maybe you've listened to these 3 categories and you've thought, oh my goodness, every single one of them I can see myself in. That's okay. Maybe just starting to notice when your emotional eating is showing up, which one feels like the most dominant? What need is trying to be met? If we look at emotional eating as trying to meet a need, then we stand a shot at trying to make some shifts that aren't just about just stop doing this behavior. My approach, for those of you who've been watching my channel for a while, is that we look at our mental and emotional health around food first, and then when we get that into a healthier place, then behavior change starts to feel more possible. So I'm a psychotherapist and I help people make peace with food. And I do that through individual and group therapy, as well as some courses and workshops. And you can work with me online from anywhere in the world. So if you're interested in finding out more about me and what I do, you can check out the description below. So I got a kitten last week and I thought, how cute would it be to have a kitten running around in the YouTube video? Turns out that kittens and filming do not go together very well. So until she's calmed down a bit, she's going to have to be shut out for filming. But anyway, I hope this was helpful. Thanks for watching and I will see you on the next video. Yes, I will.